thank you to Senator Wyden for holding this hearing and for your interest in working with us on solutions. I can't wait to talk to you, Rita, but let me just ask Cecil a quick question.
Okay.
One thing that hasn't been talked about, Cecil, is how the funding can be used from the Abandoned Mine Land Fund to help fund the Miners Pension Protection Act, which I'm a co-sponsor of, and thank you for your work with our coal miners throughout Eastern Iowa, who, as you say, they're getting hit from all sides. Let's face it. You can call it a war on coal, you can call it a battle on coal, I don't care what you call it. You know, we're losing coal miners every single day, and the retirees are getting hit now because of the pension. So $495 million is what I see currently in the Mine Land Fund, and they've been spending less than half of that. Can you talk a little about that?
I think it'd be good to lay just a little foundation here, because the premise of this legislation is to draw from what is already there. This is another role that the government has played in these plans over the years. In '92, legislation was passed and signed by Republican President George Bush that allowed for any miner that retired prior to October 1st, '94 to have their health care guaranteed by the United States government off the interest money of the Abandoned Mine Fund. This law was amended in 2006. It also established a permanent appropriation of $400 and some million. And that theory behind that was that the coal industry was paying this amount of money in taxes on leasing. So there's two funding sources that have been available here since '92 to fund the health care and now we're proposing not to add anything else to that legislation other than to just give us a right to have access to the amount of money that was appropriated on a permanent basis in 2006. So we're not here without a solution to this. And that's the only thing that this legislation is asking to be done. So there's two sources of funding here, but the interest money off of the Abandoned Mines Fund, plus you make a good point, Senator. There is additional money in the Abandoned Mines Fund itself. It has not been used, but we have access, as we gather here today, to the interest money off of that. Plus, we have a permanent appropriations established by the Congress of the United States in 2006 for healthcare purposes. If we extended that to pension purposes, we could fix this problem. That's pretty much what this bill does.
Well, that's a really important point to make, and I thank you for letting us know that there is a solution out there that's, I think, very reasonable. And Rita, thank you again for coming and your testimony, and you're here for everybody else, and I thank you for that. You've been terrific. I'm just thinking, Mr. Chairman, if there were hundreds of thousands of Social Security beneficiaries getting their retirement benefits cut by as much as 70%, there would be a national outrage.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And these Teamsters played by the rules, as was talked about today, did exactly what they were told to do and worked long hours and many years with the expectation that this would be there. And yet that's exactly what's happening to them. And look, I get the math, and we talked about it earlier. This is tough. Mm-hmm. Central states' liabilities exceed their assets by tens of billions of dollars, according to Mr. Gottbaum. They're on a course toward bankruptcy. I get that, but MIPR is just not fair. No. It wasn't fair in the way it was done, without transparency, without hearings, without this committee ever taking a look at it. It was slipped into a bill in the dark of the night. I voted against it. Others voted for it. I'm not here to point fingers on that at all, but I will say we now need to work together. We need to figure this out. It's not fair in terms of the result. And people say, well, you're just worried because it's Ohio. It's not just Ohio. I had my team do an analysis that you've seen that goes through every state and every congressional district in America to show what the impact is. And it affects everybody in this hearing room.
It does.
And I think the Pension Accountability Act that we put together helps because it fixes a broken process. It says that difficult decisions have to be made, but everybody deserves a seat at the table if that's the case. Mm-hmm. Again, it's about fairness. It's really about making it democratic. Workers and retirees are given a binding vote under our legislation on any pension cuts, not just a show vote, which is what it is now for any big plan. Treasury can overrule it. It also makes it sure that there's a fair vote by counting the ballots that are actually returned, rather than counting all unreturned ballots as a yes. To me, that's outrageous,
You're right.
and that's what occurs now. You don't return your ballot, it's an automatic yes. That makes no sense.
No.
A bunch of us wouldn't be elected here if that was the case in our democracy. And so the purpose is not to stop the process of fixing it, but to ensure that everyone is at the table. And I'm convinced we'd get a better result if that was true.
Absolutely, we would.
And that's why I think this legislation is an important step. It's only the first step. But to get a fair result for Rita and the hundreds of thousands of other people who are seeing these dramatic cuts to their pensions with no notice is just,
It's not a democratic process as far as we're concerned, and this is
No, it's
supposed
not.
to be a democracy. And before I forget, this is my first time testifying. I would like to make a special thank you to the IBT, ARP, and the Pensions Right organization. But my husband wrote a wonderful speech, and he started out with the three most important words in the Constitution, which are "we the people." And a lot of people have read it, a lot of people have seen it. And having his most three important words, what I'd like to add on to that, we are guaranteed certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These cuts come into fruition, we're not going to have a life. What kind of life will we have? Not what we thought the American dream was supposed to be, not what we thought when we were putting in all those hours where our husbands and spouses were working. Our life, our quality of life is going to be diminished. I'm going to be living a substandard life, which I don't think is fair just because my husband is gone. The liberty, we're not going to have the right to go and do what we want because our financial resources are going to be stripped from us. And the pursuit of happiness, all of those ideas of happiness and the dreams that we believed in this country and why so many people came to this country and our forefathers signed into the Constitution, those are no longer going to exist. And I just don't know how in good conscience how people can go to bed at night and not see what's going to happen, the domino effect, the catastrophic effect that's going to happen in this country. There are going to be people dying just not from the stress of this, but they're not going to be able to buy their medication, which is going to lead to stress, which is going to lead to death. There's going to be more people applying for public assistance. That's going to put a burden on the government. There has to be a bipartisan solution to this problem, and I know that you can all work together and come together and do it. I believe that. We have to. We have to save this generation. We're the last generation that's ever going to have money. Our kids aren't going to have it. They're struggling now. So it's up to us to set the precedent and say, we're going to be here. We're going to keep fighting till we get a solution that's fair to all of us who've given everything, especially I'm the third of, like I said, there was a gentleman who committed suicide when this first came out. Mr. John DeWitt had a massive stroke just like my husband did. And now my husband. There's going to be more and more people dying, and that's going to be blood on the hands of someone who won't step forward and help us. We worked hard. We built these economies. We contribute so much to economies when 87% of the economy is driven by the middle class. And what's going to happen when we're gone? Has anyone thought that far ahead to see what's going to happen? The bottom line isn't always the dollar. There's a human aspect element to this as well. And I thought that that's what this country was founded on. And that's all I'd like to say.
We appreciate it.
Rita,
Senator
thank
Miller,
you.
you're next.
Thank you. And let me just, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just say, you're speaking not just for yourself, but as Butch did in his life, you're speaking for hundreds of thousands of others. And I've met with hundreds of those pensioners, of the Teamsters in Ohio, and you have given a voice to them today. And you are now the face of this battle. So
Please don't
continue.
forget us. Please, I'm
Well, we
begging
won't.
you. Please, don't forsake us.
And remember, on the House side, there's a companion bill that was also introduced after our bill over here, and it's bipartisan. And this doesn't mean that we don't continue to look for other sources of funding, including ways to replenish these funds that could be raised inside the multi-employer pension system that we're working. You mentioned the Pension Rights Center, working with them and others on.
Yes.
So
A great help.
I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Okay, thank you
Thanks,
so
Rita.
much.
God bless
Thank you
you.
all.